It's kind of a term that might be popular, or some folks might know. The RFD, it was that rain-cooled air wrapping around the backside of a thunderstorm and collapsing to the ground that finally got that rotating thunderstorm to be more concentrated with its rotation and produce a tornado.
Hi, it's Mike Obday, and welcome again to Memphis Mike and Friends. We always talk about Memphis weather. It's always a topic of conversation wherever you go. And we know in Memphis, if you don't like the weather, just wait, it'll change. We have cold winters and hot summers. Those are pretty common things. We may have an autumn, we may have a spring. Sometimes they shortened out, sometimes depending on the season and the year. But yet we've had ice storms, we've had Hurricane Elvis many years ago. We've had lots of rain. We've had lots of dry times, so just a plethora of weather here in the Mid-South. So it makes it fun for our meteorologists here in town to predict the weather and to study it. Today, we've got the Chief Meteorologist at WREG, Tyler Eliasen, with us today, and he's going to talk about his life a little bit. We'll learn a bit about his background, his family. We'll also talk about the science of weather, which is really interesting, the tools they use, the things they look at, and how they study weather. It really is a big-time science. So we're going to learn a lot today, and I hope you enjoy it. And we'll talk to Tyler next on Memphis Mike and Friends.
Welcome to Memphis Mike and Friends. Mike and his friends will take you on a journey along memory lane while at the same time discuss current events in and around Memphis and the Mid-South. We will talk Tiger sports, the Grizzlies, and just about every other relevant event in our area. But not just sports. We may ramble on about almost anything. Along the way, you'll hear from Mike. You'll get to know all the friends and meet a lot of interesting people along the way. Here we go with another episode of Memphis Mike and Friends.
Hey, it's Mike Obday again, and welcome to another episode of Memphis Mike and Friends. Today, I got one of our favorite weathermen here in town now, relatively new, but not brand new. I've got Tyler Eliasen with me today, and he's joined us from WREG TV here in Memphis. How you doing, Tyler?
I'm doing great, Mike. Good to hear from you, man.
Good, man. How's the weather today?
Oh, hasn't it been great, right? Mild again. It was, freezing over the last couple of days, so good to be warming up again.
Yeah, that north wind was not good.
Oh, not fun.
No, but anyways. Well, a little bit, can you tell, you're kind of new to the Memphis area, but tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where'd you grow up and kind of siblings and what did you do and all those kind of fun things?
Yeah. So I always tell people I'm kind of from all over the place just because I grew up in a few different spots. I was originally born in Detroit, Michigan, lived there for about 5 or 6 years. And then my dad got a job with Delta Airlines. So we moved to Atlanta, of course. We were there for about 9 years, from like ages 6 to 15 or so. And then middle of high school, kind of not the greatest time to move, but I had a brother living in Chicago and I wanted to be closer to him. And I convinced my dad to look for new jobs in downtown Chicago. He found a cool job and we ended up moving to Chicago when I was 15 years old. So I was able to grow up there through the rest of high school and did my college in Northwest Indiana, not too far away. So a few different spots, but back and forth across the country, a lot of different weather and great childhood. I had an older brother and an older sister and just a lot of good memories.
Yeah, were you athletic or bookworm or both? Or
Oh, yeah. So very athletic, but never diverse in athletics. I focused on just soccer. My brothers and sisters, they played basketball, but they were kind of focused on soccer as well. So that was a thing that I always wanted to do. So I started playing when I was 7, 8 years old and played all the way through college. Actually got a team in Northwest Indiana that played Division I soccer, and they had a great meteorology program. So that worked out really well.
Wow. Yeah, I saw on your bio on the website Valparaiso, and a lot of people may not know where that is. I happen to, because when I graduated from Memphis back 100 years ago, I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and so I'm very familiar with that north and northeast, northwest Indiana. But that's pretty cool.
Most people remember it from the Final Four. I think it was 1998.
Exactly.
Bryce Drew. I think was it Ole Miss they beat?
I think it was. Yeah, because Ole Miss still don't live that down. But,
no, for sure. That was our one good moment in sports history at Valparaiso.
Or CBS Sports call it the one shining moment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But So yeah. Oh, so I didn't know you played Division I soccer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a great time. Kept me busy for sure because you're up doing 5, 6 a.m. practices five,
Sure.
6 days a week, and then going and studying for a pretty tough major. So it was a good experience. So I had a great time.
So what attracted you to meteorology? What
Man,
meteorology? I'll get it right in a minute.
it's a tough one. I think a lot of people growing up, a lot of meteorologists at least, they always have kind of that one storm or a tornado or a big event of some sort that kind of triggered their interest and their passion in it. And for me, I don't remember any one scenario or one day or one event. For me, it was just kind of I was always interested in the weather for as long as I can remember. I mean, either it was a snowstorm living in Michigan, or even hoping for snow when I was living in Georgia as a little kid, or a tropical storm. I was just always watching the Weather Channel, the '90s, like a lot of people did back then, back in the heyday of the Weather Channel, and I just always liked doing it. And I never really understood that I could have it as a career one day, especially on TV. It just never clicked. And one day I was sitting in my living room, I remember it was my senior year of high school, and I was thinking about, what I was going to study in college because I was starting to apply to colleges. And I was like, I'll just study business or something, kind of the usual
Sure.
go-to. And my dad said, "Hey, why don't you study meteorology?" And I was like, "You can do that? That's a thing?" I had no idea. And I was like, "Yeah, let's check it out." And it just so happened that one of the best schools in the country for meteorology happened to be an hour away in Northwest Indiana. So that was
Wow.
perfect.
Wow. So what? I mean, I've heard that before about it's a very difficult subject. What makes it so difficult? I guess because I'm not. I mean,
Yeah,
I know there's more to it than what we see on TV. But
sure. Sure. Yeah, so a lot of sciences are obviously pretty difficult. I mean,
sure.
doctors and then nurses and anything with science, but specifically the math with meteorology is the most reason that
Ah,
people end up not getting into it or steering away from it middle of their getting their degree. It's pretty intense physics and mathematics.
okay.
Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3,
Yeah.
differential
Oh
equations, and then
goodness.
applying that math to how the atmosphere works, if that
Ah,
makes sense. I know it's a lot,
sure.
but
No.
there's layers to the atmosphere. It behaves like a fluid. So obviously here at the ground, we say, okay, today it was 56 and cloudy, but there's a bunch of stuff going on, multiple layers of the atmosphere above us that lead to what's going on at the ground. So just a lot of different factors that you have to consider when you're forecasting. But when you're in college, it's all about the math that's the most difficult.
Okay. Well, my undergrad's electrical engineering, so I took that same path
Yeah.
with Diffie
Yeah, you
Q.
got it.
Diffie
Yep.
Q was about the end of me. Actually, Calc 1 about washed me out, but I was too stubborn. I stuck it out. But
Good.
yeah, it was yeah. And then I had I could have taken matrix methods to get a minor. I needed one more math class.
Oh
I could
man.
take a matrix methods in the engineering department. You doing it on a computer, or at that time was punch cards using Fortran. That's a long time
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
right? Or I could take it in the math department and do it the old-fashioned way with a pencil, and
There you
not a
go.
PC, but a CP, a common pencil. And so that was a
Like that.
mistake, by the way, because you start solving these 4x4, 8x8s, 10x10 matrices. It's just like
Yeah.
insane. Like when would
Oh
I
yeah.
ever use this of all things?
Exactly.
But I
Exactly.
got that minor, which whoop-de-doo. But yeah, I can appreciate the math. I mean, that's certainly a area where people wash out pretty quick. So,
Absolutely.
wow.
Absolutely.
So you get your degree. Now, what at
Yep.
that point in time, are you thinking TV? Are you thinking NOAA? You thinking what are you thinking?
Yeah, great question. So when I first got into like my freshman year, it was all about TV. That's what I wanted to do. For whatever
Okay.
reason, I was just kind of drawn to it. I think just the relationship that I could have with people. I liked explaining things in a simple way,
Okay.
and the feedback from people. So that kind of fit. And then I remember like my sophomore year, I went to a conference, and there was somebody from like Southwest Airlines talking about being a flight dispatcher. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, that's really cool. Like they got to I mean, basically, I didn't know this, but a plane can't leave the ground, not because the pilot didn't say so, but it can't leave the ground until the flight dispatcher says it's okay. They have to calculate weight of fuel, path around storms, their routes, weight of passengers, and all these types of things, and then give them the okay. So that's all meteorologists doing that type of work. And I was like, that's really interesting. thought about it for a couple months, explored it a little bit more, and then just kind of settled on TV. And that's, what I ultimately ended up doing. But aviation is still something that definitely intrigues me.
That's interesting too, because you may or may not know this. Tim Simpson is an aviator,
Yeah,
so you guys
right.
are
That's right.
kind of tied together. Yeah, and was friends with Sean Hannity of all people back in the day. But anyway, well, that's interesting because you don't think about all the different areas where that's true. I knew that about the airlines,
Right.
but and I used to fly all the time. But you don't think about those things. My brother was a navigator on in the military and B1s and B-52s, and same issues
Oh,
there
wow.
with. But it's just a little more stringent, I think, in the military. But had the same functions.
Sure.
Had the same functions though. But so what is your first? You graduate from college. What's your first gig?
Yeah, so I sent out maybe 50 resumes, or 50 or 60. And this is kind of the usual when you come out of college, trying to get a job and break into TV. And I had two callbacks. One was Sioux Falls, South Dakota,
Ooh.
and one was Panama City, Florida. And I said, well, that's an easy decision.
Yeah. Well, snow.
Florida.
Yeah, the other one's easy though.
Yep.
Snow every day almost,
For
right?
sure.
Golly. Panama City,
exactly.
wow. So that's different than Chicago for sure.
It was, and I had been to the Panhandle of Florida a couple of times just on vacation from when we were living in Georgia, and knew I loved the area, and flew down and had a great interview, and ended up starting there. This would have been like 2013, spring of 2013.
Okay.
And started doing like weekend meteorologist, 3-day-a-week reporter. That's typically how you get into it, and it was challenging because I had never been a reporter before. I wasn't trained as a journalist. I was trained as a scientist, and they said, here's a camera, you're going to cover stories 3 days a week. And it wasn't just the fun stuff either. It was like, hey, there's a car crash, or hey, go cover this commission meeting. And I had no idea what I was doing, but ultimately I think it was a really good way to just kind of develop your on-air ability and your ability to ad-lib, doing live shots and getting out of the studio and meeting people too. So I did that for a couple of years, and it was great.
Wow. So like you said, you kind of learn the back office and the how to be tell a story at the end of the day.
Exactly. That's so important to kind of learn the different aspects of the business, not just one specific thing, because it makes you more well-rounded, and it helps you understand everybody else's job a little bit better, which makes the whole team better.
Yeah. So at this point, are you married at this point, or are you?
Yeah, so interesting story. I was getting ready to take finals in my senior year, and my girlfriend at the time, we'd been dating maybe a year and a half, and I flew down to Panama City, and they sent me home with a job offer. And on the way home, I was on the flight, and I started looking up engagement rings on the flight home. Driving back to camp, it was kind of like this thing. I just, okay, you got a job, let's get married, right?
About income, right?
And, yeah, exactly. So I was 23 years old, and we got engaged before I graduated, and she had a year left and at Valparaiso. She actually studied meteorology too.
Oh, wow.
And so she was in her senior year, the whole first year that I was in Panama City. So yeah, it happened pretty quick.
Okay. That's pretty, yeah, they do. It does happen pretty quick. It's very similar to what I did. I ended up, we got married one weekend, and on a Saturday, and on Sunday we moved to Fort Wayne. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a culture shock.
When you know.
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
Yeah. We dated for about 4.5, 5 years. So we definitely knew. But
wow.
So you're in Panama City, and that's a pretty cool place. I mean, you do get a little bit of a change in the season a little bit down there, don't you?
Sure. Yeah. We my first winter there, we actually had an ice storm like 6 months after I started working there, which was highly unusual, obviously. So that was interesting. I did like ice storm live shots, and we had tropical storms and severe weather, similar to our climate here, but a whole variety of weather.
Yeah, we just don't have to deal with hurricanes here. We just kind of get the remnants of hurricanes. But
exactly.
So you were, I guess, from what I read, you were involved in 2 different pretty bad hurricanes over time.
Yeah, so we ended up not having anything too bad in Panama City.
Right.
When I was there for 4 years, I ended up getting promoted to the morning meteorologist role there. Did that for another couple of years, and then just was ready for a bigger market, more challenges, and ended up getting a job in Tampa. And I was there for 6 years. And yeah, we had Hurricane Irma right when I got there in 2017, and Hurricane Ian, and that was a whole new thing for me because I had done a lot of severe weather coverage, for hours on end, but we're on the air for 54 hours.
Mm.
We're working in 12 to 15-hour shifts. We're sleeping at the station, and you have the entire viewing area watching, your coverage. Tampa was, I was lucky enough to be at the #1 station there. So it was just a lot of responsibility. And ultimately, I think that kind of just shaped, how I do the weather on TV and how I walk people through things. I had a great chief there in Tampa, and that kind of got me to where I am today.
Now, those hurricanes, were they Gulf or Atlantic?
Yeah, so they both, in Tampa specifically, it's you get the West Coast storms are obviously the much more problematic storms because
Sure.
of storm surge.
Right.
So usually in October was when we would get the biggest threat during the year, but both of those storms happened in August and September, and they kind of hooked up through the Caribbean and hit the west coast of Florida.
Wow.
Irma hit just south of Tampa, and then Ian hit Fort Myers, which was just devastating a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I remember that one now. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have
Yep.
to deal with that up here, thank goodness. But it's
No, not at all.
and I know it's tough down there. Even a lot of rebuilding and cost of insurance, and just there's a lot of
Sure.
issues with people living down there, and just the
Yeah,
rebuilding process. You see, takes a long time.
it certainly does. A lot of challenges that they're facing for sure.
Yeah. So, what's some things maybe about a hurricane people don't really realize? I mean, we obviously see the stuff. We see the devastation. We see the rain and the lightning and the winds.
Yeah.
But what's some things that maybe from a scientific standpoint that would be pretty interesting to know?
So when you see like, okay, there's a Cat 5, it's got winds of 160, 170 miles an hour. Those winds are only within like the immediate eye wall of
Okay.
the storm, which can only, in some cases, extend out 5-10 miles. So a lot of times we talk about this as a massive storm coming into wherever, Texas, Florida, 150-mile-an-hour winds, but the real devastation is within a 5 or 10 mile swath wherever that eye wall
Mm.
comes ashore. And for me, going through several hurricanes now at this point, landfalling hurricanes, it's really not that bad if you're not in that eye wall. You're getting 70, 80 mile per hour winds away from the center of that storm. It's bad, it's windy, but it's not a whole lot different from like our severe thunderstorms here in the Mid-South. Like the worst of our severe thunderstorms are kind of like going through a hurricane in some ways.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that
Yeah,
wall is everything, and that can be pretty.
exactly.
I mean, what's a large wall? I mean, what's one that's huge?
Typically, the width of an eye wall is not going to be more than a few miles, maybe 10 or 15 at most, but
Okay.
that would be an extreme case.
Wow. Okay, that's not as
Yeah,
big as I thought it
yeah.
would be. Okay.
No, very, very small.
Yeah. So what else did you learn at Tampa? Were you just doing weather at that point and doing any
Yeah,
other?
so I had gone there, and I knew I didn't want to be a reporter anymore
Right.
and do that kind of thing. So, before they hired me, I said, "Hey, look, I'm coming here to be a meteorologist. I'm not gonna do reporting." So they understood that, and I did weekends there, which is kind of, in the TV world, you're doing weekends. It's somewhat of the bottom of the
Yeah.
pecking order, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I was doing weekend evenings and then filling in for our chief whenever he was off, and then we would tag team, severe weather and tropical coverage. And I was there for 6 years. It was a great experience. And again, I ultimately wanted to stay there, but I kind of just reached a point where I was like, I don't know if what I want here is ultimately going to come to fruition, because things change, and I wanted to, become the chief there when our current chief had retired, but I just didn't know if that was actually going to happen. So I said, let me look and see what else is out there right now.
Okay.
Because I knew I was at the spot where I was ready for, this type of role, being a chief meteorologist and leading a team in a fairly large market. And I ended up looking around, and Memphis came calling, and it just kind of worked out, kind of fell into place.
Yeah. So you mentioned your wife was a meteorologist as well. What has she done with her degree at this point?
Yeah, so she's always kind of followed my career. She came to Panama City, like I said, about a year after I was there, and she ended up doing a couple of different jobs. One specifically was working at a boat dealership, and they were located on the water, so they needed a lot of marine forecasts. So she did that for them kind of on a daily basis, and she really enjoyed that. And then once we had kids back in 2020, she just started staying at home with them, and she's been holding down the fort for us ever since.
Yeah, how many children do you have?
We have 3, 5, and under. So we're
Oh
pretty busy
my
right now for sure.
goodness. Yes, you are.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. So, man, that's a lot. Boys and
God bless
girls?
her.
Yes.
Yeah, we have two boys and a girl.
Oh, well, the boys, yeah. Yeah, I got two grandsons. They're boys and under 5, and they're tough.
Yeah.
They're
They're wild sometimes.
they are certainly that, but they're a blast.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yes, they are.
So,
A lot of fun. We enjoy it.
so when you in Tampa, did you put out resumes at that point, or did you just hear about Memphis and applied?
Yeah, so typically it's kind of like any other job. You're sending out a resume, but you're also sending out like a reel.
A reel, yeah.
It's a video example of just some of your work, and so I sent that out to a few different stations and had an interview here, and about a month later, signed on, and then we moved in the summer of 2023. So we've been here about 2.5 years now.
Yeah, God, really, 2.5. Doesn't seem that long.
Yeah, can you believe it? It's wild. Yeah,
I
time
know.
flies.
I know. So, who all did you get to interview with when you came here?
So we have a fantastic news director, Bruce Moore. He's been in the market for 23 years now, I think, and he's been all at Channel 3, and had a great chat with him. And he was probably the most unique interview I've ever had in TV, because most of them just want to know, are you a nice guy? Do you work well in a newsroom? Tell me about your weather experience, that kind of thing. But Bruce is so much on like, tell me about what you've learned at your high school jobs, like things way in the past. Like, he really wanted to get to know you as a person, and that kind of struck a tone with me. Like, he really, really cared about who you were as a person, and whether or not you'd be a good fit. He's got kind of a history of hiring just really good people at their core, and I think that goes a long way in this business, especially. So had a great interview with him, and of course the typical people are our GM here, and a couple reporters got to talk to, and producers, and just got a good feel for the station, and that was it.
I don't know much about TV markets. I've lived here most of my life, but it seems to be unique. Talking to a lot of the folks in your business, that this may be a bit of a unique market in the fact that there's a lot of people who's been here for a long time, and some of them came here looking like this. And maybe you may be in this position yourself. Time will tell. But this is the next step, right? This is I've got my goal to go here. In fact, I think it was Stephanie Skurlock. I think that's right. I think it was her. She wanted to end up in New York.
Oh wow!
I think, or was it Kim Clark? I can't remember now. Sorry. Anyway, one of the ladies thought they'd end up in New York. And they got to Memphis, and they just said, I didn't want to leave. I loved it here.
Oh,
right?
wow.
They loved the job. They loved the station. And you just look around, especially Channel 3, there's so many folks that have been there so long. I mean, Joe Birch over at Channel 5, he's been there 50 years.
Yeah.
50 years at one place.
And that's such a rarity these days to find a place that you can stay for that long. So that's incredible.
Well, I mean, Tim was there. I don't know how long Timpson was there at Channel 3.
I think it was about 34 years.
Yeah,
maybe,
a long time.
Something like that.
Long time.
Todd Demers, our morning meteorologist, been here 40-something years. So
it's amazing.
No, it's an interesting time in the business. I think, back in the 70s and 80s, even the 90s, the heyday of TV, you could be in the smallest of markets, and you could be very, very happy and live very, very comfortably. And I think what has kind of sparked kids coming out of college now and jumping 4 or 5 or 6 different markets until they settle where they're going to stay, it is just a matter of pay and benefits hasn't increased in those small markets in some cases since the 90s. So you kind of have to, if you're making more at McDonald's potentially in your first market, you have to move up, and that's how you get to a place where you can have a family and support a family. And I think that's why we've seen a lot of people kind of jump, market to market to market. For me, it was actually a bit of a step down in terms of market size to come here. It was more of a career advancement, just being a chief and leading a team. So that's kind of what I always wanted to have is that type of role, and it was the right fit for me. Yeah,
and good experience, obviously, going forward.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So what is there something, we're always in a constant state of learning, right? If we got a brain, we got a pulse, right? So as a meteorologist, what have you learned lately? What is something that you've learned that maybe you didn't know before?
Gosh, as a meteorologist, let's see. I mean, I'd say one thing coming here that was quite a bit different. I was a meteorologist in Florida for over a decade, and you don't do a whole lot of winter weather there, obviously.
True.
But coming here, we had a storm 2 years ago, President's Day, I believe it was, where we got 6 or 7 inches, and I hadn't done any snow forecasting since college. And even then it was very minimal. So it was kind of like, all right, let's get back into this a little bit and kind of retrain myself on what I needed to look at, because snow forecasting is a whole different animal. Yeah, you can look at, okay, it's going to snow, but then when you start talking about liquid to snow ratios and humidity throughout the layers of the atmosphere, how much is going to start reaching the surface and when, is there going to be mixed precipitation? It's a whole different animal. So relearning that, so to speak, and reteaching myself that was a big thing. But thankfully, it's been very successful. We've had a lot of great forecasts with our recent winter storms around here.
Okay, I got a good question for you, Mr. Weatherman.
Shoot.
What is the technical, not terribly technical, but what is the technical definition of freezing rain, sleet, hail, and snow?
Great question. Okay, so remember I said layers of the atmosphere, right? So you kind of have to think, okay, if you look at a picture in your mind of just going up through the layers, there's warm and there's cold air. If it's all cold all the way up, it's going to be snow, because everything starts as snow. Okay. So it's ice crystals way up in the atmosphere. They grow and reach the ground if it's below freezing all the way to the surface.
Makes sense.
You start mixing in some warm air at certain layers to that. That's when the mixed precip starts to come into play. So let's say it's freezing rain. So those ice crystals fall, they get to a certain point where they melt, turn into liquid above the surface somewhere. But then let's say we're below freezing at the ground. So that liquid is falling into a shallow layer of very cold air, at least below freezing. And everything on the ground is below freezing: roads, your back deck, your porch, flagpole, your car. And when it hits, it freezes. So that's where we get that encasing of ice. That's the bad news. We obviously don't want that.
Right.
Ideally, if that shallow layer of cold air is a little bit thicker, those tiny raindrops that have melted from snowflakes will refreeze before hitting the ground. And that's where you get little ice pellets. That would be sleet.
Gotcha.
You can also get sometimes like partially melted snowflakes that kind of glom onto each other and turn into little balls. And that's something totally different. That's called grapple. So there's kind of 4 or 5. Grapple, Graupel.
I've never heard that term.
Yeah, it's not a common one, but it can happen. So that's kind of another, one of the 4 or 5 different precipitation types in the winter that we can deal with. Hail is something totally different. Hail has to do with thunderstorm updrafts.
Okay.
Wind rising in the thunderstorm, those same water droplets and ice crystals high up in the cloud can start to glom onto each other. They're below freezing. They freeze into tiny little ice pellets, if you will, for lack of a better term. And then that strong updraft, which can be in some cases 100 miles an hour, so wind going up through the thunderstorm, supports those. They grow and grow and grow until they either fall out of that updraft or the updraft collapses, and we get these ice balls, hail, falling to the ground that can be massive in some cases, 2-3 inches sometimes. So, that's a little rundown of all the precipitation types there.
That's interesting, because it makes a lot of sense with the different layers and everything else.
Yep. So and trying to forecast that. So that's why we have a hard, fast rule that you're never really going to see snowfall totals from us until about 48 hours out, sometimes 72 hours, depending on the forecast confidence, just because of where that rain snow line and mixed bag of precipitation is going to be. Because if it looks one day, 3 days out that it's going to be all snow, but then 2 days out, it looks like that mixed line is going to come a little bit further north, your snowfall totals are going to get cut in half. So we want you to have the most accurate snowfall totals. So that's why that usually comes out a couple of days ahead. Yeah,
and it's amazing in the I've been living here a long time, like I said. It's usually there's snow north of I-40 and none south of I-40. It's just,
exactly.
I-40 is the drawing line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, how has technology changed your ability since you got out of college? I mean, technology certainly has changed. AI is now in place. I'm sure that's being taken into consideration now, and even in weather.
Yeah.
But how has
Yeah.
technology changed your job?
So we've had I mean, let's think, since I've gotten out of college, it's been what, well, almost 13 years now. And just in that time, I mean, we've had new satellites go up that are higher resolution that can tell us new things that we couldn't before. I mean, for instance, one of the new GOES satellites that went up, I believe it was in like 2015, 2016, had the ability to detect wildfires before radar can see their smoke and before the first 911 calls came in.
Wow.
So it was a whole new amount of data that we've had. Models have gotten better as we figured out how to put more data into them and refine the equations that they're using. New models have come out. You mentioned AI. I mean, this past year, Google DeepMind has a new weather model that strictly focuses mostly on tropical weather, and it was one of the most accurate models of the year.
Mm.
And so that is really, and just like it's affecting every industry, really starting to take shape in the weather world. And that's a great thing, because the more accurate data we have, the more advanced warning we can give folks, the more accurate we can be. So there's been a tremendous amount of success in basically every aspect of our jobs and new advancements in the last 10, 12 years.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing to watch on severe weather nights. You start to see rotations and things we couldn't see before, were potential tornadoes, which is what we deal with a lot here, obviously in this part of the country.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that's relatively new, right?
Yeah. I mean, our radar technology, our next radar network here in the country is, I believe, installed in the mid 90s at some point. So it's
Uh,
beginning to get a bit dated. But prior to that, yeah, you're absolutely right. Not having dual pole technology is allowing us to see that rotation. It was very, very tough. And that's why you see like a warning or even like a tropical cone back in the 80s and 90s was much larger. You had to warn for a much larger area.
sure.
Now they're getting smaller and smaller because we can really hone in on where is the dangerous
Right.
spot and how accurate we can be projecting out tropical cyclones and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, you see that now because used to in the old days, all of Shelby County would get, the sirens going. And now it's
Exactly.
just certain parts.
Just one little corner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
So that's much better. So is there, how far are we away from some new technology as far as, you mentioned new satellites up there. You got to have the technology on the ground to take all that data in and to process it and to be able to present it graphically or analytically, however, both ways probably. But I know you guys got some pretty neat stuff back at the station several years ago that was kind of an upgrade to what was there. But what's like the next step?
Gosh, yeah, that's a good question. I think there's different sectors that people are working on different things. Storm chasing has obviously become so big in the last couple of decades. And I
Yeah,
think not many people know this, but and sometimes it just seems like, oh, these are just thrill seekers. They're just going out to get pictures. But a lot of these people are trying to gather data from inside a tornado, whether it's shooting a radio sonde up into a tornado, a sensor that can pick up that circulation to try and get more data about how tornadoes form. And they've really made a large gap, or created a long gap from where we used to be 20 years ago, because we can now understand what is that final piece of the puzzle for a tornado to form. We know we need wind shear, we know we need moisture, we know we need a source of lift for thunderstorms. But the final piece of the puzzle was always kind of like, why are some storms producing and other storms in the same environment aren't? And that's where kind of the rear flank downdraft came about. It's kind of a term that might be popular, or some folks might know, the RFD. It was that rain cooled air wrapping around the backside of a thunderstorm and collapsing to the ground that finally got that rotating thunderstorm to be more concentrated with its rotation and produce a tornado. That was something that's really just started to become more understood again in the last couple of decades, and that's all because of storm chasers. Aside from that, I think our computing power is probably kind of maxed out for now, but AI has kind of come in the last couple of years, and I mentioned the Google model. That is probably the next sort of wave of new technology, is who's going to come out with more AI models and how they're tweaking them to understand different aspects of the atmosphere, and we'll just see what happens. But we're at a spot now where we can go out a week, and typically that forecast isn't going to change very much, if anything at all. Certainly not within 3 or 4 days. Day 6, day 7, you might get a little variability. Like maybe by the time we get there, it ends up being 5 or 6 degrees colder and we have to adjust. But for the most part, a week forecast is very, very reliable. And then we get into days 8, 9, 10, and pattern recognition is very reliable. It's the specifics that are still yet to be desired. But even then, I mean, there's times where, given next week, I mean, Christmas Day is 9 days away, and the forecast confidence at this point is very high that we're going to have a very mild pattern that's going to yield upper 60s and potentially some low 70s. So it just kind of depends on the pattern. But it used to be that 3 days out was a bit iffy, and we're certainly not at that point anymore.
Yeah, I can remember 5 going, ooh, hey, taking a little chance there, big dog. 5 days.
Exactly.
Are you crazy? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
And then you get the whole 24-hour news cycle, so the Weather Channel is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just crazy. But I think AI is, I dabble in AI and play around with it. It's very interesting, very scary at the same time.
Sure.
From what it can do, but hopefully we'll have enough sense as a civilization not to do anything too crazy. But I can imagine in the weather world, just think about gathering all the data that it's going to gather, that'll always be there and will be used for modeling, and it just on top of each other, and just having that quick computing power to be able to make decisions and change. Something changes instantaneously, you'll know it.
Exactly.
It's just
the ability to adapt in real time as new data comes in. That's crucial. I mean, there's things like, they call them sail drones, that are basically like a little tiny sailboat that they put out into hurricanes that will feed back real-time data from the middle of that storm. Whereas before, it was just the hurricane hunters going out and dropping dropsondes in every 6 or 12 hours when they're flying. And before that, it was just satellites. And before that, we didn't have satellites. We couldn't see it. So it's been a huge advancement in just the data collection standpoint.
Well, here's a nice little controversial concept that we can talk about for a minute.
Okay.
Do we have the ability to control the weather?
So there has been a lot of talk about like contrails, which you may have heard them referred to as chemtrails by the conspiracy theorists.
Right.
The basically this idea that we are spraying from jetliners for whatever reason. We do have the ability to cloud seed, which has been going on for a long time. I think it's been since like the 60s, maybe even prior to that. Areas out west that struggle with droughts in the plains and the higher elevations of the plains out in Colorado, where it's very dry and they need rain for crops. There has been the ability to go out in plains and put out particulates into the atmosphere, which are basically used as, it's called condensation nuclei. You have water vapor in the air, but unless there's a little particulate of some sort, a tiny piece of dust or whatever it may be, it can't condense. It can't create rain. So they could go out and they could seed these clouds with these condensation nuclei, and in some cases they can get 10% more rainfall out of a particular system. It can't make it rain, but if they know a system is coming, they could maybe squeeze out a little bit more out of the atmosphere to help with drought situations like that. Beyond that, no, we absolutely cannot control the weather in any way. I know there's been, things that have been said over the years of like, we can just bomb a hurricane or whatever it is. No, can't do that. We are at the mercy of Mother Nature for sure.
Yeah, well, it's the guys at 3 a.m. on the AM radio, those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So the particulate, does that make the moisture heavy enough to go to the ground? Is that what that does, basically?
So if you have water vapor, which is a gas, you need something for it to condense onto. Basically, think that you put a cold glass outside in the summertime and it gets condensation on the outside of it because there's a surface there. There's a cold glass. It's just a tiny particulate that allows that water vapor to condense onto a surface, creating a raindrop.
Got it.
Or enhancing a raindrop.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I've heard of cloud seeding before. So, but like I said, I've heard
it's been going on for a long time.
That whole they're up there making weather, Billy Bob.
Yeah, they're poisoning us or something like
Yeah,
that.
well,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah,
You wouldn't believe the stuff we hear. I mean, there are people out there that believe that even like TV meteorologists are getting paychecks to spew this idea that we're not creating poison in the atmosphere from chemtrails. It's just wild, the stuff that goes on and you see on Facebook.
yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, as we, we're a country of 320 million, 330 million people.
Yep,
There's going to be some nuts out there, but still,
of course.
anyway. Now, how do wildfires and things like that affect the, especially in the West Coast, California? They have challenges with weather. Period. I mean, it's gorgeous most of the
Yeah.
time, right? But when they have
Right.
problems, they have problems with droughts, fires. How does a fire, especially the ones they've had, how does that affect the weather out there over time? I mean, not over like a long period of time, but just that period of time around the event. Does it hurt the weather? Does the smoke do anything to the atmosphere that inhibits weather? Or I don't really know what I'm asking, but
Well,
it just seems like it's a big
yeah,
event.
no, I mean, in terms of like what happens immediately after. So you have a wildfire, you've got a bunch of ash, a bunch of dead plant matter, and all those types of things. When they get into a big rain event in the months following, you can have massive flash flooding because that ash is just like a putty when it rains. Obviously, water can't soak into the ground, so you get a ton of runoff. Issues like that. You can have intense heat waves in the summertime following a wildfire in the winter months because all that vegetation is gone. Sometimes you're losing shade. That same ash or just exposed dirt absorbs heat and radiates that heat a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. So yeah, it absolutely has impacts, immediately after. In terms of the smoke, I mean, just air pollution, it can hover. LA's already got bad air pollution, but you get something like that, it'll make it worse for sure. But there's that definitely after effects for sure.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, from a technology standpoint, outside of AI, there's a lot of the new satellites going up related to weather, or just some of them, or anything new coming up you know of?
I don't know of any upcoming weather satellites in particular. We've got the GOES network, we have GOES East, GOES West right now. There's Himawari satellites over on the Western Pacific, which usually you'll see when they have typhoons. If they've got major typhoons, you will get great imagery out of that. They've developed a couple new high-res models, which are models that are obviously more resolution, but they go out a shorter distance in time. So they might only go out 48 hours. Convective models that are typically allowing us to really time out exact arrival times for thunderstorms and squall lines. Like you see a lot of time on TV where we're saying, okay, the squall line's going to get here between 8 and 9 p.m. We'll say that the day before, and that a lot of that confidence comes from our convective models.
Okay. All right, makes sense. Well, where will things look like in about 5 years, you think? Because technology-wise, 5 years is a long time.
Yeah, and like I said, we've made such advancements, not just in weather, but just technology as a whole, obviously. Sure. I don't know that we're going to see a ton of change in our weather technology in the next 5 years. I think it's more so about the TV industry as a whole changing in the next 5 years. It's changed in the last 5 years. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how we adapt to that. We've already adapted a lot with going more digital. I mean, you can find weather forecasts anywhere now on your phone. Right. TV stations like us have 4 or 5 or 6 different outlets that you can get the same information that you see on TV. And I think that's how a lot of people, especially the younger generation, are consuming it.
Sure.
And it's just figuring out how we support the industry while at the same time putting out the information, because people still need the information and it still comes from people. If you get a forecast online from your Apple weather app, we call them crap apps because they're just data. Yeah. It's just raw data. But right. If you want a forecast from a person, there's got to be a person. So it's just figuring out, are we all forecasting for Facebook one day? I don't know what it looks like. I think there's always going to be TV stations, but it's certainly shrinking of staff. We've seen that across the board. And I think meteorologists are probably the ones that will be here long term, because you get into those situations like we've got a tornado coming through Shelby County or coming through DeSoto County, and you can't look at the Weather Channel then because they don't live here and,
Right.
and they don't know streets and they don't know, hey, there's a Kroger on that corner. And that's really what makes the difference is knowing your area, because that's how people understand it. They want somebody who lives here and who drives the same roads every day and can put things in terms of relatable, identifiable objects and locations rather than, oh, it's this street, this street. So I think we've got some staying power for at least the next 5 years, hopefully the next 50.
Well, the interesting thing too is talking to some of the sports guys. They have gotten their time squeezed down to almost nothing anymore on,
Oh, yeah.
on the newscast.
Yeah.
Because you almost lead with weather some days, depending on the weather.
Yeah.
But you're always up
Absolutely.
near the front for a little tease, and then you get plenty of time. So people want the news and they want the weather, bare minimum.
Yeah.
So you're right. I
And
think
it's just,
you guys are
it's
fine for a while.
It's an adapting thing, because I think even our sports guys, you've got ESPN and that you can get the scores anywhere. I think they've had to adapt to, how do I tell a story that you can't get anywhere else? Those stories from our high school teams and our college teams that are profiling just a single player, that's the type of thing, localizing it as much as possible. And that's where their real value comes in.
Well, yeah. And you got sports radio that talks about sports all day long, right? So
exactly.
There's so many different outlets.
Yep.
To your point, there's outlets there that's even more so than weather. There's not many podcasts about weather, I bet. I can't imagine nothing personal, but they can't be that exciting if they were. So, but
there's only so much to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, outside of this one's been awesome. So,
yeah, absolutely.
But anyway,
absolutely.
Well, cool. Well, tell me about your team.
Oh man, which sport?
No, well, your weather team. I'm sorry.
My team or my news team?
Your weather team. Yeah.
So we've got 4 meteorologists. We've gone through some change here at Channel 3, as folks here in the Memphis area know. Tim retired when I came in. I took over for him, and then Jim kind of decided right before that he was going to retire too. So Jim Jaggers retired at the same time. So we had two new meteorologists come in around that time. One of them was Jake Dalton, who actually just left back in August for a chief position at one of our sister stations in Baton Rouge, where he's from. So that worked out great for him. Happy for him. And we just hired a new meteorologist this week. Her name is Lindsay Gaffney. So you'll be seeing a lot more of her on Channel 3 going forward. But we have a great team, very experienced team. And, we pride ourselves on not just being accurate with the weather. That's first and foremost, but, just telling a relatable weather story and having a conversation with folks, because I think that's what makes the difference. You can get the weather anywhere. There's 4 stations in town. They've all got meteorologists, and to be honest, we've all got the same equipment these days. So what makes the difference is the people and their experience and how they can tell a relatable weather story that people enjoy watching, and that's what we pride ourselves on.
Yep, everybody's got their favorites.
That's right.
There's that comfort. It's a very comforting thing and especially in a storm of some sort that's going on, that there's somebody you trust, and so people lean on folks like yourself.
And that just comes with time.
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
You got to build that trust, right? Just like anything else.
Exactly. Yep.
Anyways,
that's right.
Well, you did go that route. What is your favorite sports teams? Since you lived in Chicago, you lived in Atlanta, you lived in some interesting places.
So most recently I was in Tampa, obviously. So big Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. So root for them to hopefully get into the playoffs here.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Lightning is my hockey team.
Okay.
If you ever go to Tampa, you have a chance to go to a hockey game. It's probably the most fun you'll ever have at a sporting event. They just do a great job, and it's right there in downtown, right on the river. So it's really neat. Playing hockey in Florida with palm trees all around.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then I still root for the Bears and the Bulls back in Chicago. So that's about it. But always a Grizzlies fan. We've got a great team, and I'm just hoping they kind of figure it out here, because it seems like we're trying to figure out what the next step is.
It's frustrating.
It's kind of frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah. With Ja or without Ja, we got to figure something out. So.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're at. I think everybody's there, and it's time to do something. We had, man, the glory years were the glory years, man, and they were awesome. They were awesome. But anyways, well, Tyler, I know you've got things to do here in a little while, but I appreciate you being on with us. Don't hang up at the end. I'll ask you to do something for me at the end here. But anyway,
of course.
So what is just real quick? What's your day like for work? Because I know you work on what? Do you start at? You got to start newscast at what? 3:30 or something?
Yeah, so for me, I come in about 1:30, 2 o'clock most
Okay.
days, and we have, depending on the day, I'm either doing the three or our new meteorologist Lindsay's doing the three. But if I'm doing it, it's three, four, 4:30, 5, 6, and 10. So it's a lot of news. And once I get into making my graphics after I've forecasted and done all the little things we got to do. It's updating the web and doing radio hits and updating social media, that kind of stuff. It's just go, go, go in these weather hits. And some days it's quiet and it's the same thing. You see me every time, and it's I'll give you the same story in a couple of different ways. And
All right.
it's sunny and 75. And there's some cases where we got a nasty line of storms rolling through, and we're leading with weather and doing extra weather hits, and I'm tracking storms all evening. So it's kind of different day to day, but if it's a good day, I'm out of here by 10:30 and then back home with the kids.
Wow. So you have to do all your own graphics and everything, huh?
Oh yeah, so some people think we have weather producers, and in some cases there are weather producers that'll make graphics for us. But we make our own forecasts. Pretty much everybody in TV these days, they're all degreed meteorologists, scientists, and so I'll sit here and I'll come in and I'll forecast for about 30 minutes, make the forecast, and then making all those graphics that you guys see on TV.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being with us, and we'll talk at you again soon.
Enjoyed it, man. Thanks for having me, Mike.
It was good to catch up with Tyler and to learn a little bit about weather science and how things work and a little back office view of things there. And it's good to know we have highly experienced, educated people looking out for us during severe weather times. So the next time we have a severe storm and you see Tyler and his team working, you'll have a little better understanding of how some of that works. And it's just good to have those folks there in place. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. Watch for us on social media. Please share it and like it. And if you got any ideas for people that might be a great guest, just shoot me an email at mike.hobday@comcast.net. Or you can go on Facebook, at our Facebook page, Memphis Mike and Friends, and hit me up on DM and catch me there. Y'all have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Maybe you met a new friend, learned something you didn't know, or just relaxed for a few minutes. We hope you join us next time on Memphis Mike and Friends as we look back, look around, and look ahead to all things Memphis. Until then, may God bless you as you travel life's highway.